I've never thought of myself as the suspicious type. Really, I was the kind of husband who believed trust was the foundation of everything, even when it wobbled under real-life weight, late nights at work, too many texts from unnamed coworkers, phone screens flipped down without explanation. I always gave the benefit of the doubt. Maybe too often. That's why I shocked even myself the day I stood in our home office and stared at that paper. It wasn't hidden, just left out in the open like a grocery list or a reminder note. Printed on standard white copy paper, folded once down the middle and slightly creased at the corners like someone had nervously handled it more than once. At first, I only glanced at it. Rachel was supposed to be heading out for a corporate retreat in Charleston, one of those 3-day work trips where they attend a few panels and spend the rest of the time drinking wine on hotel terraces. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I didn't protest. She said it was a good networking opportunity and I trusted her. Then I saw the name. Hers first, Rachel Miller. Flight number, time, departure, arrival. But right under hers, in the passenger grouping, Jude Hill. My first thought wasn't even jealousy. It was confusion. The name sat there in sharp black ink, completely out of place. Jude Hill. It echoed in my brain over and over again like a bell tolling just out of rhythm. I stood there staring at it for what must have been a full minute. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the sound of the neighbor's dog barking outside, but none of it registered. I just kept reading the same two names, willing them to make sense together. The thing is, I knew Jude. Not well, but enough. He worked at her company, some senior strategist or financial consultant, one of those vague roles people have at mid-sized firms. We'd met exactly twice. The first time was at her holiday party where he introduced himself like he'd been coached on how to seem both charming and forgettable. The second time, a summer barbecue hosted by her office, I watched him laugh a little too hard at her jokes. I remembered the way he placed his hand low on her back as they stood by the grill. It wasn't gross or overt. It was practiced. Subtle. The kind of touch that tells you something's been happening under the surface. Still, I said nothing. I remember telling myself I was just overthinking, reading too much into something meaningless. I even convinced myself for a while that I was the one with the problem. So that night, after I found the itinerary, I waited until Rachel got home. She came in like she always did, heels clicking softly against the floor, blazer slung over one arm, checking her phone with that slightly distracted look she always had at the end of a long workday. "Hey," I said, trying to sound neutral. "Your flight's still at 10, right?" She didn't look up. "Yeah. Why?" I shrugged. "Just wondered if anyone else was flying with you." That got her attention. Her eyes flicked up for a split second, too quick, like she was trying not to be obvious, and then she smiled. "Yeah, actually. I think they booked us in groups to get better rates. Some kind of corporate policy," she said, then added, "Why? You jealous?" She said it like a joke, but I heard the test in her voice. Like she was watching to see how far she could push the line. I smiled back, but inside something hollowed out in me. I said something about trusting her, about it not being a big deal. And I meant it, or I wanted to mean it. But the truth was already stretching itself across the space between us like a taut wire. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the kitchen staring at the flight confirmation again. I Googled the seat layout, pulled up the airline's seating chart, and matched the numbers. They were sitting next to each other. Not across the aisle. Not even with a buffer seat between them. Side by side. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I just lay there, watching the ceiling fan rotate, wondering how long I'd been ignoring my instincts. Wondering how many little signs I'd swallowed because I didn't want to seem insecure. How often had I gaslighted myself for her comfort? The next morning, I made a decision. I opened my laptop, searched for the same flight, and booked a seat. Not near them, I didn't want to get caught, but in the last row, window seat. I paid extra just to make sure I'd have a direct view of the boarding aisle. I didn't tell her, obviously. When she left for the airport, I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my bag and heading out myself. My heart was pounding the whole way, not from excitement or fear, but something worse. That sinking, sick anticipation of a truth you already suspect but don't want confirmed. At the airport, I kept to myself. Wore a hat low over my face, used a kiosk to print my boarding pass, and waited until the final boarding group before getting in line. I saw her at the gate. She was laughing at something Jude said, her body angled toward him. It wasn't just her posture. It was the ease. The familiarity. Like this was routine. I boarded last. Kept my head down as I passed the row. She didn't even glance up. That part hurt more than I expected. She didn't look around, didn't scan for me like maybe she wished I were there. She was entirely focused on him. And then I saw it. As she reached for the overhead bin, Jude placed his hand on her lower back. Brief. Barely noticeable. But an asterisk, mate. It wasn't the touch that broke me. It was the way she didn't flinch. That kind of familiarity doesn't happen overnight. It's built piece by piece until someone else's hand on your wife's body feels natural, even welcomed. I took my seat in the back and stared out the window as the plane took off. 1,000 thoughts crashed around in my head, but one kept rising to the surface. This wasn't just coincidence. It couldn't be. Back in the hotel room that evening, I sat on the windowsill with the curtains half drawn, staring out over the city like I might find some clarity in the traffic lights and silhouettes below. The view was nice, terracotta roofs, clusters of palm trees swaying lazily in the wind, but it felt like a backdrop from a life I wasn't actually living. Rachel had checked into her room hours earlier. I watched from the end of the hallway as she and Jude rolled their carry-ons toward the elevators, laughing about something only they understood. I didn't follow. I didn't want to know what room they went to. Not yet. Instead, I sat by that window and let my mind wander, only it didn't have far to go. It knew exactly where to return. To all the little moments I'd brushed off. The patterns I had chalked up to work stress or plain old marriage fatigue. Funny how clear things get when you stop lying to yourself. Like the client dinner she bailed on our anniversary for last year. We had reservations at a place that took 3 weeks to book and she canceled 20 minutes before we were supposed to leave. Said her boss needed her for some emergency meet and greet with a prospective partner from out of town. She didn't come home until almost 7 a.m. the next day. I remember how she walked in wearing the same heels but a different scarf. When I asked about the overnight delay, she blamed a hotel mix-up, said they couldn't find her reservation, had to rebook her at a different place across town. It didn't make sense then, but I accepted it. Because it's easier to accept a lie than ask a question you're not ready to hear the answer to. I thought about all those late nights at the office. The missed calls. The weekend site visits to obscure towns on the coast where her company, far as I knew, didn't have a single office. I thought about the times I asked how it went and she offered one-word answers: fine, productive, long. Never stories. No details. Just enough to plug the silence. Then there was her perfume. The old one she used to wear was soft, floral, something that lingered on pillows and made me think of spring mornings. At some point she switched to something sharper, heavier. Muskia. The kind of scent that lingered in the air like a dare. I asked her once why she changed it. She said it made her feel more like herself. I didn't know what that meant, but I told her it smelled nice anyway. Then I remembered something that felt like her punch. 2 months ago, I came home early from work, a half-day the office gave us before a long weekend. I expected to surprise her. Instead, I found her closet open and a half-packed suitcase on the bed. Not an overnight bag. A weekender, big enough for 3, maybe 4 days. I asked where she was going and she froze just for a second, but it was there. Then she smiled and said she'd mentioned it, that she and her coworker Mia were going to a last-minute strategy seminar in Sarasota. Women in leadership, she said, tossing a couple of blazers into the suitcase. I'll forward you the email, didn't I already? She never did. That same weekend, Mia posted pictures on Instagram of her with her sister in Chicago. I asked Rachel about it later. She laughed. Said Mia must have canceled last minute. That the company had reassigned her to pair with someone else and that she was too exhausted to think straight. She always looked tired lately. Always moved like her limbs weighed more than they used to. I used to feel sorry for her, like maybe she was just burned out. I even offered to plan a vacation. Just the two of us. Get away, clear our heads. She said she was too swamped, that she couldn't possibly take a full week off. Maybe sometime next quarter, she added with a dismissive wave. Her eyes didn't leave her phone. That was the other thing. The phone. It had become an extension of her hand. She kept it close, even in the bathroom. Locked screen. Face down on the nightstand. Notifications silenced. The same pattern over and over, and somehow I convinced myself it was just the way people were now. God, how did I not see it? I mean, I did. I just didn't want to believe what I was seeing. I ran both hands down my face, trying to slow my breathing. My palms were sweaty, but the room was freezing. The air conditioning was on too high, but I didn't move to adjust it. I thought about texting her. Just to see what she'd say. Something like, how's the hotel, or dinner plans tonight? Something casual enough to pass. But I didn't. I knew I wouldn't get the truth. Instead, I checked my own phone. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing from her. Not even a goodnight text. We used to say goodnight every night. Even when she traveled. Even if we'd fought earlier in the day. Now, I was lucky if she remembered to text at all. I opened my photo album and started scrolling. Pictures of us from happier times filled the screen, trips to Asheville, birthday brunches, her wearing my hoodie and flipping me off for taking too many candid sh*ts. I stopped at one taken exactly a year ago, her in our kitchen, leaning against the counter, flour on her nose from baking. She was smiling without realizing it. That version of Rachel felt so far away now, like a character I dreamed up. I wondered if she felt the same way about me. If Jude was who she thought of now when she saw something funny. If he was the first person she texted after a win at work. If she ever thought about me when she laughed with him, or if I'd already been replaced in her head. That's the worst part. The not knowing exactly when it started. The uncertainty of when us stopped being real for her. Was there a moment, a line she crossed and never looked back from? Or did it happen slowly, like water dripping into a crack until the foundation gave out? I stayed by that window for hours. Didn't move. Just watched the night deepen. Lights flickering off in hotel rooms across the street. Voices echoing from the pool deck below. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to. Because I couldn't. Something about this kind of pain doesn't let you cry right away. It just settles in your chest like cement. And in that silence I made a quiet promise to myself. I wasn't going to ask her anymore. No more soft inquiries. No more giving her room to lie. I was going to find out the truth. Even if it broke me. It was the morning after I watched them walk into the elevator together. Rachel came down for breakfast at the hotel cafe like nothing was out of place. Hair neatly tied up. Light makeup. Wearing the navy dress I'd bought her for our last anniversary. That was the part that stuck in my throat. I sat 2 tables behind her. I'd arrived earlier and taken a corner seat, one where I could see her reflection in the glass behind the espresso machine. Jude joined her 10 minutes later. They didn't hold hands. Didn't lean in. But the energy between them wasn't platonic, it wasn't even trying to be. She laughed once, head tilted, eyes lingering on his. I remembered that laugh. Not the sound of it, but the way she used to lean into me when she did it. Like I was part of the joke. This time, she kept her body perfectly still. She was sharing it with someone else now. That was when I knew it wasn't just a fling. It wasn't a mistake. This was a world they had carefully built where I didn't exist. One where my name was barely mentioned. A sanitized version of their lives where I had been neatly removed. Later that day, I returned to my room, pulled the curtains, and just sat on the bed in silence. I kept waiting for the anger to hit, but all I felt was cold. The kind of numb that spreads out like frost under the skin. That night, back in our house, she moved around the kitchen like any other post-trip evening. Kicked off her shoes. Complained about the airport coffee. Said something about one of the presentations running long. She didn't ask about my weekend. Didn't even notice I hadn't shaved or slept much. It was like she'd already emotionally checked out and hadn't bothered to take the luggage with her. When she went upstairs to shower, I stayed behind and stared at the dark screen of her laptop. It was sitting half-closed on the table, blinking softly like it had something to say. And I moved toward it before I could talk myself out of it. I'd never checked her devices before. Never peeked over her shoulder or guessed her passwords. Not once. That kind of surveillance always seemed beneath us. But trust, once broken, rewrites the rules of what's sacred. The screen flickered on. She hadn't logged out. A work inbox popped up first, filled with calendar invites and forwarded memos. Then I clicked over to the messaging app tab, the one they used at her job, Slack or something like it. At first, it was innocent. Team chats. Project updates. Emojis. Nothing meaningful. Then I noticed a direct message thread labeled Taylor, Purchasing Department. We didn't know any Taylor. The conversation thread wasn't long. Most of the messages were short, coded. Same elevator, 10:15, or dinner plans still on, room 608. But what stood out was the tone. The kind of tone 2 people use when they know they're doing something wrong and they like it anyway. And then came the pictures. Nothing explicit, but the kind that cut deeper than nudity ever could. Jude's hand on hers over dinner. A hotel room selfie. Both slightly blurred but unmistakably close. In one photo, her head rested against his shoulder while they watched a movie on a laptop. The caption under it, like he'll ever find out. I closed the tab, opened it again, closed it once more. My hands were shaking, not with rage, but with something quieter, something worse. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt erased. I shut the laptop and placed it back exactly how she left it. Angle, screen brightness, everything. I didn't want her to know I'd seen. Not yet. When she came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping, She smiled like nothing was broken between us. She made a half-joke about how exhausting networking had been. I gave her a tired nod. No confrontation. No accusations. Just silence. She cooked eggs for herself, offered me some, poured orange juice, flipped through her phone like she hadn't just detonated the life we'd spent a decade building. I sat across from her, watching. Not the way you watch someone you love. The way you study a stranger who's wearing your partner's skin. There was no tension in her. No guilt. Not even discomfort. And that's when it became clear. This wasn't some recent slip. This had history, momentum, practice. The lies weren't fragile, they were polished. I looked at the ring on her finger, still there, still worn, and it meant absolutely nothing. How long had she been preparing for this version of her life? The one where I was background noise. How many client dinners had ended with her slipping her hand into his? How many mornings had she stood at the sink brushing her teeth beside me while texting him under the counter? I remembered how, just last month, I'd made her coffee and placed it by her keys. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, said, "You're good to me." I didn't know that moment would loop in my head like a cruel joke. Like a playback from a sitcom I hadn't realized I wasn't laughing at. I ate the scrambled eggs she made without tasting them. Not because I didn't want to stir suspicion, but because I didn't have the energy to do anything else. She chatted about the weather, about Emma, our daughter, and how she might need help figuring out next semester's classes. The conversation was smooth, seamless. She had rehearsed this, not just the cheating, the aftermath, the normalcy, the illusion, and I realized in that moment, she didn't plan to tell me. Not now, not ever. This life, her living two stories at once, wasn't temporary. It was structured, strategic. I was the decoy, the stable man she could hold up as proof of balance. The husband box checked off on some invisible list. And Jude? He was the secret chapter, the real one. I put my plate in the sink and said I was going to lie down. She smiled and told me she'd join me soon. I shut the door to our bedroom and stared at the ceiling fan, just like I had in that hotel room. And for the first time since this all started, I didn't feel confusion. I felt clarity. I wasn't losing her. I'd already lost her a long time ago. The next morning felt like someone had replaced my life with a near-perfect replica. Same furniture, same walls, same woman humming softly in the kitchen like she always had. But everything was off by a fraction. A hairline fracture running under the surface of each second. I woke up to the smell of coffee brewing, something light sizzling in the pan. For a moment, I just lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how I felt. But there was nothing to name, just a kind of dull weight pressing down on my chest. Not quite grief, not quite rage. It was like waiting at the scene of an accident for someone to tell you what hurts. Rachel was already dressed when I walked into the kitchen. Loose gray sweater, black leggings. Her hair tied up in that effortlessly casual way she always pulled off. She turned when she heard my footsteps and smiled like nothing was out of place. "Morning," she said, sliding eggs onto a plate. "You want toast with these?" I stared at her for a second longer than I should have, then nodded. Sure. No mention of the night before. No questions. No comments about how I'd barely slept. How quiet I'd been. No sign that she sensed anything was wrong. She moved through the kitchen like she was performing a routine she'd practiced 1,000 times. Coffee mug here, butter knife there. She even made small talk. Something about a new intern at the office who had messed up a client call. I didn't absorb the details. My mind kept drifting back to that open laptop, to the messages that were still seared into my memory. Room 608. He'll never find out. I watched her spread jam on toast. Her nails were painted a soft mauve color new, I realized. Sometime between Friday and now she'd gotten them done. And not for me. Not for a retreat. For him. She handed me a plate and sat across from me at the small breakfast table, sipping her coffee like it was just another Tuesday. I tried to eat, but the egg stuck in my throat. My stomach turned with each bite, and I found myself pushing food around more than actually eating it. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and chose not to say anything. That was becoming her thing lately, intentional omissions. We *p*nized normalcy. So, she said after a long sip, Emma's thinking about switching her major again. She called me last night while I was unpacking. Emma. Our daughter. The only real thing left in this house. What's she thinking now? I asked, forcing my voice to sound even. Psych. Wants to maybe get into counseling. Says she wants to help people figure themselves out. She laughed softly. Teenagers, right? I nodded, my spoon scraping the plate. Right? She didn't ask why I was quiet. Didn't even glance up to see if I was listening. Her eyes were on her phone now, thumbs gliding across the screen. Probably answering work messages. Or maybe Jude's. Maybe another coded good morning sent under a fake name. And still, I said nothing. I studied her face while she scrolled. Familiar, yes, but different. Or maybe I was the one who'd changed. Her expressions seemed rehearsed now, like they were borrowed from old memories. Smiles without soul. Laughter without warmth. When she finally looked up, she tilted her head a little. You okay? I wanted to say, no. I'm not okay. I read everything. I saw what you wrote. I watched him touch you. I know you've been cheating, lying, planning a second life behind my back. I know I'm no longer your husband in any meaningful sense. Instead, I said, didn't sleep much. She frowned sympathetically. You looked like you were tossing around a lot. Bad dreams? Something like that. She nodded slowly, then looked down at her mug. Maybe you need a break too. Just some time away. Clear your head. You've been working nonstop. The irony made me dizzy. She was telling me to take a break from the life she was slowly dismantling in front of me. Maybe, I said. Haven't thought about it. She stood, walked over, and kissed the top of my head. Her lips were warm, soft. It was the first time she'd touched me in 2 weeks. It felt like being kissed by a stranger. She dropped her mug in the sink, checked her watch, and said, I gotta run. I've got that client call at 9 and I still need to print a few things. Drive safe, I murmured. Always do, she replied, grabbing her coat and heading out the door. And then I was alone. In the kitchen. With eggs I couldn't eat and coffee that had gone cold. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was sterile. A vacuum left behind by someone who was never really here in the first place. I sat there for a long time, staring at her empty mug. Her lipstick had left the faintest smudge on the rim. Bright coral. A color she used to reserve for date nights. Nights with me. I thought about calling Emma. I missed her. But what could I say? Hey sweetheart, how's school? By the way, your mom is having an affair. No. I couldn't pull her into this yet. Not until I was sure of the next step. Not until I had a plan. So I got up, rinsed the dishes, and placed them in the drying rack. I moved through the house like a ghost. Touched the door frames. Flicked the lights on and off. Opened the linen closet and stared at neatly folded towels. All of it so normal, so stupidly mundane. It felt like a set built for a life that didn't exist anymore. I checked my phone. No new texts. No emails. No Rachel. Then I opened her laptop again. Sat down with it in my lap and let the screen glow onto my face like it might offer some kind of divine clarity. I didn't click into the messages again. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened a folder. Labeled receipts. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, maybe a hotel bill. A dinner charge. Something I could hold in my hand if I ever needed to walk into a courtroom and say, this is what she did. There were dozens of PDFs, statements, invoices, travel bookings. One, in particular, stood out, an itinerary for a weekend in Charleston. But not the one she just returned from. This one was dated 4 months earlier. Different hotel. Same flight number. Same seat. I recognized the dates. It was the same weekend I'd flown to Denver for a work conference. I remembered her saying she was visiting her sister. Even showed me the train ticket. I never thought to ask why a train ticket would be needed for someone flying out of state. I closed the folder and shut the laptop again. This time carefully. I was done searching for more proof. I had enough. What I needed now was time. Time to decide who I was going to be on the other side of this. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to cry. Not in front of her. Not even in front of myself. I was going to do what she didn't expect. I was going to wait. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't shout. I didn't cry in the shower or leave dramatic voicemails. What I did instead was pour myself a glass of water, sit at the dining table, and open a notebook. Not a digital one. A real notebook. Leather-bound. One Rachel gave me years ago for Father's Day. For your brilliant ideas, she wrote on the inside cover. Well, here was one. I wrote a single sentence on the first page. This is not for revenge. This is for clarity. I needed to keep that in front of me. Because what was forming in my mind wasn't wild or vengeful. It was slow, careful, and built out of necessity. I didn't want to burn our life down. I just wanted out. Cleanly. Quietly. Without giving her a chance to make me the villain in a story she authored. The first step was gathering evidence, not to confront her, not yet, but to protect myself. I'd read enough stories to know how this goes. The moment you bring it up, the clock starts ticking. Suddenly you're the controlling one, the unstable one, the one who drove her into someone else's arms. If she wanted to keep wearing that mask, I needed to let her. Just a little longer. I made copies of everything. *TS of the Taylor Purchasing Department chat. Email receipts for hotel stays. The Charleston trip from 4 months ago. A billing history from a boutique jewelry shop she'd never mentioned. 3 purchases over $400 each. I printed them all, hole-punched them, and slid them into a binder I labeled simply records. It felt absurd, like I was prepping for a business audit of my own marriage. But I couldn't afford emotion now. Emotion got you sloppy. Emotion got you manipulated. Next came the lawyer. I didn't want anyone local. Too many connections. Too much gossip. So I researched firms 1 county over. Found a woman named Linda Grace. Sharp. Direct. Top-rated for high-conflict cases, but also respected for her discretion. I scheduled a consultation under my middle name. Just in case. She called me back 2 days later. "Jason," she said, her tone brisk but not unkind. "I've read your intake. I'll be honest, you're in a good position. You just need to play this carefully." She didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. She told me what I needed to know. She asked what I wanted most. Custody? Compensation? To drag Rachel through the mud? I thought about it. Sat with the question longer than she probably expected. Finally I said, "None of that. I want peace. And I want to come out of this as the man I know I am. Not the one she'll try to paint." Linda didn't respond for a moment. Then she said, "That's rare. I can work with that." The next day, I opened a new bank account in my name only. Transferred enough to cover legal fees, first and last month's rent if I needed to leave, and a cushion to fall back on. Nothing dramatic. Nothing she'd notice if she skimmed our statements. I moved the funds slowly, strategically. That week, I started reviewing everything: credit card charges, Venmo history, hotel bookings, and Uber receipts. I wasn't looking for more betrayal. I already had what I needed. But I wanted a pattern. I wanted a map of her second life. And what I found hurt, yes, but it also gave me structure. There was a rhythm to her dishonesty. Every 4th weekend. Always a 2-night stay. Always somewhere coastal or work-adjacent. Always a fake story to cover the same holes. I tracked the purchases. Restaurant tabs with 2 entrees and cocktails. Spa charges on weekends. She said she was in meetings all day. Her company retreats had included facials, wine tastings, and on one occasion, matching luggage. All while telling me she'd had a headache and skipped dinner. Once I had it all printed, cataloged, and tucked into a drawer in my home office, I stared at the binder for a long time. It was too neat, too complete, like a thesis on my own humiliation. But it also gave me power. She didn't know I knew. She still thought she was ahead. So I played the role. Every morning I kissed her cheek. Every evening I asked about her day. I even offered to take the trash out, something I usually hated. I complimented her hair, even when I knew she'd done it to impress someone else. I didn't do it to be fake. I did it because I was building the runway to get out. Let her think I was calm. Let her feel safe. Let her keep thinking the mask hadn't slipped. Because soon the curtain would fall. I started therapy. Not couples counseling, my own. I told the therapist the basics at first. Marriage stuff, big transitions, trust issues. She nodded, made a note, didn't push. By the second session, I told her the truth. "I'm living with someone who thinks I'm still asleep," I said. She didn't blink. "What do you want?" And there it was again, that question. "What do you want?" This time, the answer came quicker. "I want to remember who I was before this. I want to leave without needing to ruin her. I want to survive this with dignity." The therapist smiled softly. "Then that's what we'll do." It was the first time I felt understood since this whole thing started. I also started running again. Not far. Not fast. Just around the block, early in the mornings before the sun came up. It helped. The movement. The sweat. The feeling of controlling something in my body when everything else felt like it belonged to someone else. One morning, Rachel passed me in the kitchen as I came in, drenched and breathing hard. "Since when do you run?" she asked, eyes flicking up from her phone. "Just clearing my head," I said, grabbing a towel. She smiled. "Healthy midlife crisis?" I laughed. So did she. And just like that, we were two actors reading lines from a play we both knew was ending soon. But here's the thing, I didn't hate her. That's what surprised me most. I hated what she did. I hated how she made me feel small, invisible, expendable. But the version of Rachel I married, the woman I once held in a hospital room after our daughter was born, the one who stayed up all night baking for Emma's third-grade bake sale, that woman. I still remembered her. And I wished she were still here. But she wasn't. She left long before I picked up that laptop. So I kept preparing. Day by day. Silently. Not for divorce. For liberation. I didn't leave the house first. That's what people like Rachel count on, that you'll crack, slam the door, and give them the opportunity to say, "He abandoned us." I wasn't about to make it that easy. Instead, I stayed. Moved like a ghost through the same spaces we'd shared for over a decade. Ate dinner at the table in silence. Watched TV without hearing the dialogue. Slept on the far edge of the bed until she eventually started sleeping in the guest room, no questions asked. She sensed the shift. Of course she did. She's not stupid, just reckless. Her energy changed. Softer, more careful. Like she could tell something had slipped, but she didn't know what or when. She tested the waters with jokes, old pet names, even a surprise dinner one night. I thanked her, cleaned the plate, and said nothing about the past or the future. Then Emma came home from university for a long weekend. Rachel snapped right back into Mother of the Year mode. Suddenly there were pies cooling on the counter, family photos being dusted, a warmth she hadn't shown in months. It wasn't for me, it was for the performance. I said nothing. Not yet. It wasn't until Sunday afternoon, after Emma had gone upstairs to take a nap, that I slid the envelope across the kitchen table. My name on the return label. Hers next to the words petitioner, respondent. She stared at it, unmoving. Then looked up at me like I'd just flipped the earth on its axis. "What is this?" "You know what it is. Jason, this is how you tell me?" I didn't flinch. How else was I supposed to? She didn't cry. Didn't yell. She did what I knew she'd do, she played defense. "You're seriously going to destroy our family over a few bad months?" I looked at her then. Not with hatred. Just clarity. "No. I'm ending something that already ended. You just haven't admitted it yet." She blinked. Once. Twice. Then stood and left the room. Just like that. No fireworks. No dramatic speech. Just the cold, hard sound of silence. 2 months after the papers were signed, the house felt different. Not better. Not worse. Just still. Quiet in a way that didn't ache anymore. Her perfume was gone. So were the heels by the door, the wine glasses left in the sink, the presents that had filled every inch of our shared life. I started waking up early. Not because I had somewhere to be, but because I wanted to reclaim my mornings. I walked the wooded trails near our neighborhood, headphones in, letting the cold air burn away what was left of the fog in my chest. On a whim, I joined a local Saturday running group. Nothing intense. Just a few people trying to outrun whatever life had thrown at them. That's where I met Elise. She wasn't flashy. She didn't overshare. She had a quiet kind of presence, the kind that made you feel like you didn't have to fill the silence. We started with coffee. Then a walk. Then long conversations that drifted into book recommendations and shared playlists. She never asked about Rachel. She let me be a person before being a story. And one night, as we sat side by side on a park bench, our coffee growing cold, Emma called me. I answered on speaker. I just wanted to say, "I figured it out, Dad." "Figured what out?" She paused. Then, softly, "You did the right thing." I didn't speak. Couldn't. I just stared at the trees in front of me, throat tight, heart slow and steady. For so long, I thought ending the marriage meant breaking our family. But what I see now is this: I didn't destroy anything. I stepped out of the lie. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't surviving, I was becoming.